God rejected a man's worship. And almost everyone reads that moment wrong. We've been taught that God turned away Cain's offering because of what was on the altar: the wrong gift, grain instead of blood, fruit instead of a lamb, a technicality, a rule Cain broke without knowing it. But that's not what the text says, and it's not what happened. God didn't reject Cain's offering because of what was on the altar. He rejected it because of what was hiding in Cain's posture. The no was never about the gift. It was about the man holding it. And here is the part nobody tells you: that rejection was not a punishment. It was a diagnostic, a warning light, a hand on the shoulder before the fall. The rejection was a redirection. God was not closing a door. He was pointing at a better one and begging Cain to walk through it before it was too late. Stay with me, because if you've ever been told no by God and called it abandonment, this changes everything. Before the first murder, there were two brothers and two altars. Cain in Hebrew, the firstborn. His name means acquired. Brought forth, one who shapes and forges. He worked the ground. He was a man of effort, of sweat, of results pulled from stubborn soil. Abel, hevel, breath, vapor, here and gone. He kept the flocks. Both of them bring an offering to God. And here is where we have to slow down, because everything turns on a single line. Genesis tells us Abel brought the firstborn of his flock and of their fat portions. The firstborn. The fat portions. The best, given first. Notice the language. It's the language of someone who thought carefully about what he was giving and to whom. And Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground. Just fruit. Some of it. No first fruits, no best, no first. The text is quiet in a way that's deafening. It doesn't say Cain brought his finest. It says he brought some. Now, generations of preachers have built a whole doctrine on the difference between grain and blood, as if God ran a sacrificial vending machine and Cain pressed the wrong button. But look closer. Later in the law, God himself commands grain offerings, flour, fruit of the ground. The very thing Cain brought becomes a holy offering God requires. So the problem was never the wheat. The problem was the posture. One brother gave his first and his best. The other gave his leftovers and called it worship. And God, who sees not the altar but the heart bent over it, responded to what he saw. And Cain's face fell. That's the phrase the text uses. His face fell. In Hebrew, the face falling is the body betraying the heart. The mask slips. What was hidden underneath rises to the surface. Cain came to the altar with something already wrong inside him, and the rejection didn't create it. It revealed it. This is what worship does. It X-rays you. It shows you what you actually brought, not on the altar, but in your chest. And here's the moment most people race past, because right here, with Cain's face fallen and his fists clenching, God does not strike him down. God does not walk away. God leans in, and he asks a question. Why are you angry? Why has your face fallen? If you do what is right, will you not be lifted up? Read that as what it is, a father catching his son at the edge of a cliff. God is not condemning. He is coaching. He's saying, this isn't over. The no you just heard was not the end of the conversation. It was the start of one. Bring it right, and you will be lifted up too. That is not the voice of a God who rejected Cain. That is the voice of a God fighting to redirect him. And then comes the warning that should stop every reader cold. If you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. Its desire is for you, but you must rule over it. The Hebrew word for crouching is rovetz, a predator flattened in the grass, coiled, waiting. God is handing Cain a battlefield report. Something is hunting you. It's at the door, right now. But you have the authority to master it. A rejection, a coaching, a warning, an open door, an exit ramp, held wide, and Cain walks past all of it. Here's the verse everyone thinks they understand. The Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but for Cain and his offering, he had no regard. Watch the order of those words: Abel and his offering. The man first, the gift second. God looked at the worshipper before he ever looked at the worship. The Hebrew word translated had regard is sha'ah. It means to gaze at, to look upon, to turn your face towards something with favor. It's relational. It's about where God's attention rests, and the text is precise about where it rested: on the man, and then on what the man brought. God didn't weigh 2 piles of produce and pick the better crop. He looked into 2 men and saw 2 hearts, one bent toward him in trust, one curved in on itself. The offering was just the outside of an inside. So when God had no regard for Cain's offering, he wasn't grading a sacrifice. He was telling the truth about a soul. The rejection was a diagnosis. It named the disease before it spread. And this is the thing we miss, because it terrifies us. A no from God can be the most honest mercy there is. We want a God who rubber stamps everything we hand him, so we never have to look at what's underneath. But a God like that isn't loving. He's just absent. The God of Genesis refused to pretend. He looked at Cain, really looked, and loved him enough to say, "Not like this. Not with this in your hands. There's a better way, and I will not lie to you to keep the peace." That's not the rejection of an enemy. That's the redirection of a father. Now layer it all together and watch what God actually did. He rejected the offering, but in the same breath, he told Cain exactly how to be accepted. If you do what is right, will you not be lifted up? That's not a closed door. That's a door he held open and pointed at. He named the danger. Sin is crouching at your door, not to frighten Cain, but to arm him. You don't warn a man about a predator you intend to let eat him. You warn the ones you're trying to save. And he declared Cain's authority over it. You must rule over it. God didn't just diagnose the sickness. He told Cain he had the strength to win. That's not the language of a verdict. That's the language of a coach in the final round, gripping his fighter by the shoulders, saying, "You can still take this." Every piece of that moment, the rejected gift, the searching question, the predator warning, the promise of being lifted up, every piece was God trying to turn Cain around before Cain destroyed himself and his brother. The no was never the punishment. The no was the rescue attempt. This is the signature of the God of Scripture, and you'll see it on every page if you know where to look. He hides mercy inside the moments that feel like rejection. The closed door is often his hand steering you off a road that ends in a field with your brother's blood in the dirt. Cain heard a no and called it abandonment, but it was the most attention God had ever paid him. The rejection wasn't God turning away. It was God leaning all the way in. This isn't only Cain's story. It's yours. The door that closed, the offer that fell through, the relationship that ended, the plan that collapsed, the no you didn't see coming, and the voice that came right after, maybe your own, maybe something crouching at your door, whispering, "You've been rejected. You've been passed over. You are not enough. And now you never will be." But what if the rejection in your life was never a verdict on your worth? What if it was a redirection away from a road you couldn't see the end of? I'm not telling you to slap a smile on your pain. Cain's grief was real, and so is yours. The no costs something, but the God of this story doesn't waste a single no. He uses the closed door to turn your face toward the open one. And then he stands in the doorway, pointing, asking the same question he asked in the field. Why has your face fallen? There is still a way up from here. The tragedy of Cain was not that he was rejected. The tragedy was that he was redirected and refused to turn. So when the next no lands and the shadow leans in to tell you it's the end, look again. Look for the door behind you, the one edged in light. The rejection might not be God walking away. It might be God showing you where to go. God rejected a man's worship, and he did it because he loved him too much to lie. The rejection of Cain was never about grain or lambs or the rules of an altar. It was a father looking into his son, telling him the truth and holding a better door wide open with both hands. Cain stood at that door with a choice, and we know which way he turned. But the door itself, the door was mercy. The no was an invitation. The rejection was a redirection that Cain was always free to follow. And the same God still stands in the same doorway, in the rubble of every no you've ever received, asking you the question Cain never answered. Will you not be lifted up? Because that's the truth no one tells you about the God of the Bible. His rejections aren't dead ends. They're forks in the road, lit from one side, with a father standing at the turn. He doesn't reject you to be rid of you. He redirects you because he's forging something out of you that comfort never could. Faith like that isn't found in the moments God says yes. It's forged in the fire of the moments he says no, and you finally understand he was pointing the whole time. If this changed how you hear God's no, there's more where this came from. Subscribe to Faith Through Fire, because the hardest words in Scripture are hiding the deepest mercy.